Hello and welcome to Almost Agreement. What a terrible start! Almost an Agreement, the baseball edition. We're super excited to introduce. You guys already know, but Mark Mamantov, Stephanie Welch, and Chris Callaway. They're the. I don't know. I guess I get to ask what the specific question of what they are title-wise in the conversation, but we'll get to that as we get there. We're Almost an Agreement. AlmostAgreement@gmail.com. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Give us a shout. Let us know what you want to know. In new news, our website is up and live, almostanaagreement.com. All the recent episodes are on there, and I'm working my way backwards to get all the previous episodes available there, as well as whatever podcast provider that you like. We're all on there too. That's what we're going to do today. We're going to try to learn more and figure out how to get these guys to put a program together for me to start a new business downtown, and we'll go from there. So we're Almost Agreement, everybody, and this is the baseball special. There we go. All right, and we're on. All right, guys. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. I have Mark Mamantov, Stephanie Welch on the Zoom call, and Chris Callaway in the room with me, and we are trying to figure out how to get baseball in Knoxville. So the big thing for me is I want to start at the beginning and how this kind of process works, because again, is this something where Mr. Boyd finds you guys and gets started, or is this something that the city has started? Like, where did this kind of all congeal to turn into a project to start with?
That'd be the best question for Stephanie, Seth, if you don't mind, because it really started with the city. Stephanie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and I think it's a part of this whole process that's often overlooked, because in so many other communities, one of the biggest challenges and first steps is recruiting a team and finding a location. And so we're past that step, although we're still early in the process. This really started, I would say, when Knoxville lost the Smokies, a couple decades ago, right? And I think at that time there was an acknowledgement that was a loss to our city, and losing a downtown stadium and a downtown team is something that people remember to this day. And so a few years ago, the city, in thinking ahead about Mr. Boyd and the Smokies lease coming to an end, had a conversation with Randy and his team about the potential of the stadium and the team moving to downtown Knoxville. And I think those were productive early conversations. And I think Mayor O'Hara announced probably about 3 years ago that the goal of the city would be to bring baseball back to downtown Knoxville. And Mr. Boyd had accumulated some property in the vicinity of the old city. So I think those were the very early conversations about the current talks that are happening around building a multi-use stadium. And of course, there's a lot of detail and conversation that's occurred since then.
Right, for sure. Okay, so just to make sure I heard correctly, essentially this was the city was kind of bummed they lost in the first place, and so when the opportunity looked like it might be an option, the city started working towards that goal. So the city started it, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Because that as far as all the conversation and everything I've talked about so far, I know there was conversation about the city and county being upset that we lost them in the first place, but I don't know, maybe it matters to some people who started this part of the process. Okay, so from there, it's how do we get to where we are? Because I guess this is one of the things that I'm probably most struggling with, other than financing. That's going to be the really super hard one, and we all know that part. But so how do we get from the city wants to do it, Randy seems like he's on board as well, to today? Is that still Stephanie?
Well, Chris, you wanted to comment on that? Because you can explain how the county got involved.
Yeah, I think ultimately it was at that point, you remember there were changes in administrations on both the county and city side. And so I'm not saying that the pitch had to be made again, but it kind of did, right? And so the concept was presented to Mayor Jacobs, just like it was to Mayor Kincannon. And I think his mind was, if this model works and the financing works, I can support this because of the private development that comes along at the same time with a multi-use, multi-purpose stadium.
Okay, so I guess to take a pause point here, was there any ever discussion of doing it without the county, or was it always going to be a city-county Boyd property joint kind of trifecta?
I think, and I don't want to speak for Stephanie, and so she can answer this if she prefers, but I think ultimately it was always hopeful that it would be a joint deal with city and county.
Yep. I would say that's absolutely true.
Okay. Because again, I mean, if for those that listen all the time, I'm sorry, I'll go over it again. I've been pitching the Metro idea for about a year now, and there's all sorts of history for it, and everybody's has their different stance on it, and it's great, and I love it, and it's a good conversation to have. My argument that it is an eventuality. We will get there at some point, whether it's 2030 or 2060, we'll see when we get there. But this being one of a very specific one where this is a joint. A joint effort between the city and county, among the other joint efforts that we already do. How much separate are the city and county at this point? Anyway, but so we're here. Both mayors are in on it. The council and the commission seem to have at least interest in talking about it. And so I guess first from here is, when do we get an official proposal? Or have we already got the official proposal?
Well, there is not a what I would call an official proposal doesn't really exist. What we do know is Randy's acquired a significant piece of property in the old city. He would like to see the stadium located there. We're trying to negotiate the outlines of a specific proposal that can be presented to the community, can be presented to both governing bodies, the county commission and the city council. So, every time we meet, there are new issues that come up that say, oh, we need to get that resolved to really have a specific proposal that we can submit to the community that people can. And we want to get feedback. We want to come and talk to you, let your listeners. I'm sure we'll get some comments back from this. And we've been going to meetings as diverse as the Old City, the East Knoxville pastors. We're going to the Planning Commission tomorrow. We're starting that process of trying to gather public input so that we can know what might be feasible and possible to the community, at the same time trying to work out the financing aspect of it so that a specific proposal can really be presented.
Because that's where I guess that's where I kind of get hung up in trying to do it, is because a number of people I've talked to, county and city and whatnot, and just friends when we do stuff on the show, is we're at least it feels like we're speaking in abstracts. We don't have this is how it's going to work and adjust from. And I guess that's a strategy that can be used for whatever reason, but like it feels like we have, I guess it's a buckshot right now, and we're trying to narrow it down to a sniper shot to clean it up, instead of starting dead center and then working our way into what everybody wants the center to be, I guess, to use a bad hunting analogy. And so I guess that's where I'm struggling. So do we have a time frame for when a more structured proposal other than the one we had in the meeting is to come up?
Yeah, I think we will. As you mentioned earlier, the financing, Seth, is a huge part of this. We probably won't know whether we'll get our legislation that we propose through until mid-April to late April. That's a big piece of the puzzle in terms of developing an overall financing structure.
And I think I apologize for interrupting, but I think a real quick thing that a lot of people paying attention loosely don't quite catch is that what for a while, until it was better explained to me, what it felt like to me is that like the special task district, all the stuff that's going on at the state level right now, feels like a checklist is getting checked off to get to an end, when the reality is it's a checklist to even talk about the end. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are having a hard time keeping up with, myself included, until more recently, because there's a momentum to it. It seems like it's moving forward. Where the reality is these are just I don't know the better analogy than it's their checkbox to even get to the conversation at the end. And I think that's, not to do your jobs for you, but I think that's something that's been missing in conversation, is that these aren't steps, they're steps toward the conversation, not step towards the end. Yeah, that's what I was wanting to get there.
No, I think it's important, and I don't know you know this, Seth, but we're flattered that you would ask us to come on, but none of us are elected officials. Stephanie's deputy to the mayor. Chris is in a comparable position as a deputy to the mayor and COO and co-chief of staff, and I'm a paid consultant as a lawyer. And so, our job is to create the best transaction we can for the community and present it to the people who were elected by our people to vote on it.
I feel like I need to do a whole separate show with you just about that, how this job even exists and how do you get into this kind of thing.
Yes.
I've been making jokes all week about how I really don't want to talk baseball with you guys. I just want to talk to you guys about how to set something up so that I can be Randy Boyd in a different version of the same conversation. I don't own a baseball team. I've got a podcast that employs 0. So if that's something the city and county want out of me, I'm here to talk. Okay, so let's get there. Let's get a little bit dirty here, because again, I think this is the one that the most people really care about. Because let me back up for half a second. I think, at least in my non-scientific surveying, I think the consensus is yes, we would love to have it. I don't think there's I know there's some, but there's some people that don't want it, period. But I think the real conversation is the how. I think as far as I can tell, everybody's like, yes, I would love to have the baseball stadium, but are we buying it? Is Randy buying it? Is some combination thereof? And so I think the financing, as mentioned a couple of times now, is the thing that most people care about, how this is going to work. And so I sat through the meeting with you guys when you did it, the joint session with the city and county, and you gracefully sent me a copy of the presentation, and I've been over it with a couple of different people talking about different stuff. And so it kind of broke up into different pieces. If I had my full text set up, I'd put it up on the screen so we could all talk about it, but I don't have it ready for us. But, so the bulk of it's going to come out of the sales tax district. Is that my understanding?
The bulk of what would be used to pay for the
stadium?
Right,
to service the debt. And this is another thing that we lay people, we don't call it service the debt, we call it paying your mortgage.
Yeah. So right now, Seth, roughly, if we finance the stadium tomorrow, we hope that the debt service wouldn't exceed $4 million a year. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's the mortgage that you talked about. That would be like you going to the bank and getting a 30-year fixed rate mortgage for your house at $4 million.
Because you have a $65-something million house, because we can all buy one of those.
And luckily, right now interest rates are extraordinarily low. So rates could rise, that could change, but right now that's about the range that we're in. So how are we going to pay for $4 million a year? And so the one thing we do know about is that existing law, and you've heard me talk about this a lot, you and I've chatted a little bit about this, is that existing law basically says that the sales tax revenues off the stadium, other than the portion, the 1.5% that the state reserves for education purposes, would be made available to pay the debt service on the stadium. So as you know, 9.25% is our sales tax rate here in Knox County.
Right, and then two and the change will be the local. In this case, it'd be the city. Does that go into it, or does that stay in the city?
Again, I may be getting the weeds more than you want, but the 2 1/4 is actually 78% county, 72% county and 28% city. And so
that is the weeds for this one, but that's something I didn't know and would like to. We'll have to remember that moving forward in conversation.
So 72% of that is county and 28%, and we can talk about that later. But the bottom line, that's the local portion of it. So 1/3 is local, 2/3, 5.5% is state. So, Seth, you go to the baseball game, or hopefully a soccer game, or hopefully go see somebody in concert. Yes, that's what I'm most interested in is outdoor concerts and maybe a little bit of soccer. But so you go see that, and you decide you want to pick up I won't use beer, family podcast, right? And so
absolutely not. This is not even remotely a family podcast.
Okay, we'll go for the beer then. And so you go by the beer stadium. You got to pay sales tax. It's a $10 beer. You went for the craft beer from a thing, and so the sales tax is $9.95 or whatever, 99.5 cents, or 92.50 cents. Anyway, some will go to the state, but of that amount, 77.5 cents goes to pay off the stadium debt. So every beer that we sell will benefit,
and that will include any sales that go on inside the stadium and then that immediate vicinity as the line is drawn.
That first thing I described to you, that's existing law.
Okay.
The legislation we're going to we're trying to pick up the area surrounding the stadium, primarily to pick up the roughly 100,000 square feet of retail Randy Boyd tells us he wants to build right around the stadium, which would include restaurants, shops, and things like that.
Right, which will generate which should generate a ton, and I need to be careful about my verbiage there. Should and could and would and stuff like that.
Right. Should is good.
Right. Should.
Could is good
because
too.
Because that's the real thing at play here. Is these are all what it's the future. We don't know what's actually literally going to happen. Nobody saw 2020 at all, but we'll get down that road here in just a second. So I don't know. How do I ask this question? So the sales tax generation is a portion, and then reasonable rent, which is a separate one that I don't know. Like I've actually asked my landlord for my business how he prices his property, and it's more than what the mortgage would be, or close to what the mortgage would be, and I don't feel like we're gonna get there.
No.
And because I guess for me, like in talking about this, a lot of people, if we're near break even on most of the bulk of this, that's fine. If we lose a little bit of money, that's fine in the short term, because that's what I assume Boyd's doing with the baseball team. If the baseball team's break even, all his business around there is where the money's at. And so if we can all break even on baseball, then we all make money off the surrounding action that's going on with it. And so that's the goal. So what are we guessing? What are we planning? What are we hoping for in the reasonable rent category?
So I listened to a little bit of your prior podcast where you said you were hoping we'd get to 3 million. I hate to tell you, Seth, we probably won't get to 3 million.
I'm not the economist here.
Yeah. So, the last deal that was just done, AA deal, the team basically guaranteed a minimum of $1 million a year of rent. So our sort of floor is at least that $1 million that they just agreed to pay in Madison, Alabama for a stadium that very similar to the stadium we're looking at that was supposed to open this year.
Okay.
That's probably on the high end of what we've seen. We're hiring a consultant to sort of pull the most recent deals, but $1 million of rent a year for a stadium this size is, we think, at the lowest level we would hopefully get, but it's probably about also in the range of what is sort of market for a stadium of this nature.
My thoughts on that specific though is that the higher it gets, the more encouraged for more activity to go on.
Sure,
because it will incentivize or force, whichever way you want to put it. It'll force the Smokies to put more activities in there other than baseball. Because I think that would be one of the worst outcomes, is that it's just baseball and just the fixed events, and then it's 70 home games a year or something like that.
Would you Seth, I know you got a lot of things you want to cover today, but Stephanie's probably worth the most on this, and I really appreciate you're again having us on here, but you keep referring to the baseball stadium. I just think it's so important for people to understand that we are making them not do a baseball stadium. It is truly a multi-purpose 90-degree angle stadium. A traditional baseball stadium is a 65-degree angle. We've learned. Ours is not going to be that. And maybe both of you all could talk about how important it is to both your mayors that this, if all we were doing is a baseball stadium, Seth, I don't think I'd be sitting here talking to you today. Stephanie, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, no, Mark, I think that's great. I know Chris and I could probably have the exact same statement on this, because I think both of our mayors have been really clear, and we've been really clear in our discussions with the team about the importance of this being a multi-use sports facility and entertainment facility. So, I could talk quite a bit about this, but, Chris, you probably could agree with me. We have been exceptionally clear. There are design features that need to be considered on the front end when you're doing a project like this, to make sure that it can accommodate multiple different sporting events, and this is all part of what we're requiring as part of this project.
So what are the structures that enforce said requirements?
So I think what you're going to see is eventually a development agreement that's going to lay out a lot of I guess I won't say rules, but a lot of stipulations. And if you talk to either mayor, you're going to hear multi-use, sport. And so I will say to you that we've this past week talked to a minor league soccer team. And so what we envision is what we have is a multi-use stadium with a tenant that's going to pay meaningful rent, that being the Smokies, with another tenant that would be potentially a minor league soccer team. Randy himself has talked about maybe playing some high school games there, starting a high school baseball league like in East Knoxville. We threw out the idea of maybe other rectangular sports like maybe football, like high school football. And so we have all these ideas. We know it's going to be used for concerts and venues like that. We know that, I think that Randy has said he'd like to use it for 3 100 of events a year, which would be great. And so I think it's important to note, as Stephanie said, we're not building Randy Boyd a baseball stadium. What city and county are doing is building a multi-use, multi-purpose stadium that was going to have benefits to our entire community and the region.
Okay. I mean, all right. I mean, I agree. And so on that, like we're talking to a soccer team, as you said, that's going to be a sublet, or any of the events are going to go through the Smokies organization? They're not going to go through the city county.
What we have said is, and we're not got into the full details, but the Smokies would be the one to market the stadium for concerts and events like that. We still have to work through the process of what it looks like if we have a deal with a minor league soccer team. Does that go through the sports authority separately, or does it go through Randy? We've really not talked about that.
Yeah, it said that you hit on something really important, and I know you a lot of good questions, but there's this the law and the tax code in this whole area, and if you've been doing some reading in the area, which I know a lot of people quote to me, said all these articles say financing of stadiums is just a terrible idea. I mean, you see it from both the libertarian side and from the very liberal side. They sort of join on this issue, and I agree with a lot of those points. That often financing of sports stadiums in this country has gotten way out of hand. So we could either say we in Knoxville, Tennessee, are going to draw the line, and we're not going to finance a stadium, and we're not going to be like Columbia, South Carolina, Charleston, South Carolina. I know you know about Fort Wayne, but Huntsville, Greensboro, all the cities we compete with, we're not going to try to have a nice coliseum, a nice auditorium thing, or are we going to try to have the same civic amenities? This is just one of the civic amenities that almost any other city our size is already offering, an outdoor concert, baseball venue, many of them starting to be used for soccer as well. Is that a good civic amenity? As a citizen, I would like to see Knoxville to be an attractive place for people to live and to do it. But I agree with a lot of the criticism, like this is not a healthy thing, but our tax code strongly encourages you not to do sort of revenue sharing with the team, because it drives you to using taxable debt, which is higher price debt than taxable debt. So there's this, I want to make sure your listeners understand that there's this disconnect or this dissonance between trying to share in the concert revenues and things like that, and then versus just saying, Randy, we'd rather be risk adverse and you pay us a real healthy rent that we know we can help pay our debt service versus trying to share in the thing.
I think I agree that that's the correct way to do it, because I think you're going to limit some of the more wild ideas that maybe the Smokies organization might have to bring something in. Something ridiculous, bring some monster truck show in there. It's their field, they can tear it up, whatever. You don't get those
that
things.
Would make me cry, but yes.
But it's not the job of our mayors and council people and the people that work in our local governments to manage an event venue. That's not what you do. That's not what you're elected to do.
No. I mean, the Tennessee Theater is managed by AC Entertainment. The Coliseum's manager and the Convention Center are both managed by private firms. Almost all larger private facilities in this area are managed by folks that are experts in managing these kind of facilities.
Right. And I think that I agree that that's the right way to do it. It's just, it's a matter, again, it goes back to that reasonable rent part of things. Yes. And it's like, I can understand in Mobile or whatever they're doing about $1 million, but is that team is invested in doing as much stuff, or are they just going to set on the $1 million is enough? We can make the $1 million in rent just by playing baseball and don't have to worry about the other stuff. And so again, like we already mentioned, there's stipulations in place to ensure that. And so I do recall specifically there's a certain number of days that the city and county are going to get. Is that going to be a shared number, or they each get it? It was like 10 days a year.
Honestly, it's a great question, Seth. We're so friendly. Everybody's working together so well that it's more like community days. We haven't talked about how they would be divided up, but those are more for things like civic events. The concerts, things like that, as we mentioned, would be done through the team. And I think
I was thinking like a jamboree, like the high school jamboree football game or something like that, where that would be a county day because the county operates the school system.
Well,
and stuff
I think
like that.
Chris is counting. I think you, and I know you will, you need to have, I hope you'll have us back when we get closer toward actually voting on this, is that I think the contract will provide very tight oversight of the team, that they will have to file probably quarterly reports on their prospecting for events, including, I mean, I think Chris is the one that I think is a brilliant idea, is having, Friday night fall, game of the week, high school games of the week down there, because, I mean, what a perfect venue.
How cool if you're a kid. Yeah. How cool if you're in high school
is
playing
that?
ball.
And baseball's over in early September. I mean, what a great avenue. So we're not thinking that would count against our days. That would be part of the calendaring that the sports authority and the city and the county would provide oversight over the team and said, look, your lease and operating agreement says you will do these things. You will bring us these prospects. You will do this. And so we've got to do a really good job drafting that to hold them accountable for maximizing the use of the stadium for the best interest of the community.
It sounds like a lot of reading.
To your point, what we have saw looking at other deals with community days, it's historically 7 to 10. And what we have found, too, is a lot of times those days go unused because you think about everything it'll be used for. It's hard to figure out 7 to 10 more other events. Mark has a great story that Nashville at Titan Stadium gets to use. Is it 3 days?
Yeah, their original lease was three days. They get the stadium for eventually metro events, and as far as I know, they've used them like just very rarely. So
because all the extra costs of putting all the things in place.
Right. Yeah. I hope we use it a lot more. It's a much more cost-efficient stadium. I can see us doing 4th of July concerts there, Memorial Day events. I can see it getting quite a bit of civic use.
I mean, this is semi-off topic, and that's one of the things that I'm concerned with, because one of my favorite things when I was in high school, it's been that long ago since we used to regularly have concerts down on World's Fair site.
Yes.
Because you reminded me of the 4th of July. That's the only one that we've continued to do.
Right.
And apparently there's some flooding structural issue with the ground there or something like that, which is why they quit doing it down there. And it's a private company that's operating that for us. And that again, it's kind of my fear is that we're going to treat this multi-use stadium project as a fix-all for some of the other issues that we're having around the city county. Because I'm a hockey fan. I grew up playing hockey when I was a kid, and I can't stand to go to the Civic. That's the only thing that's even functional in the Civic to me. I've been to a handful of concerts in there. They're awful. Went to the circus there in like the late 90s. That was weird. And so, that's my concern is that there's other things that we could be doing in the same kind of conversation, and that this is going to take how long. It's obviously not going to be 30 years before we do anything else, but how far down the road does this kick some of the other projects that may be of conversation for those of us out there that want a new Civic or want to get back to World's Fair Park to do stuff?
That's more of a city issue, but here's what I think I would say to that. The amount of money that city and county will be putting into this stadium deal is just basically a fraction of the cost. And so I don't feel like it kicks what the city may do long term with the Civic Coliseum. Stephanie can speak to that ultimately, and I'm sure when the time comes for that to happen, that may be something that if it's going well, the Sports Authority takes a look at. We've not had that discussion, honestly, but it would make sense at that point that maybe that's something that we look to use Sports Authority for.
Seth, I think you've identified a challenge and an opportunity for our community, and we've certainly invested additional money. As you know, if you're a hockey fan, I am too. The ice is much better there. I mean, there have been upgrades to the hockey facility at the Civic Coliseum, but we also have on our mid and long-term plans to make improvements to the Civic Coliseum, the World's Fair Park. I mean, we have lots of public venues that are really important to our city that we need to continue investing in as well.
Okay, because like I said, the concern being with using the World's Fair as the example, the concern being is it'll drop the incentive down. It's not even about the money part of the conversation. What's the incentive of fixing that field when all of our outdoor concerts are going to the new multi-use project in the old city? That's again, and I'll full disclosure, I was. When it got more official enough a conversation that we were doing, that this was something that we're really talking about, I was a hard no. And my running joke is if it was a ballot item and I was voting today, I'd probably just not vote today because I don't know. The financing being the one that's the most confusing. because again, and help me out with this, Mark, if I understand it correctly, there's a base tax level that's already there, and anything above that is part of this as well. And once it gets built,
So again, Seth, I don't know how much you want to get in the weeds.
I do. Get me all the way in the weeds.
You want to get in the weeds?
I spent an hour and a half with Ron McPherson from the school board trying to figure out school board money.
Oh, and that was fun.
Yeah.
I bet you were asleep.
After you guys get in the weeds, I do want to revisit this idea of investment in other venues, but get into the weeds on financing.
Okay.
No, and I would love to talk. I thought your comments on other venues were really interesting, and I'd like to hear Stephanie. I don't know if, Seth, if you've read the report when they looked at the Coliseum, $150 million. But I agree. I mean, I don't know. You don't know much about my background, but I've been president of the Symphony and the Tennessee Theater, so I spent a lot of time on venues and stuff. And so we are lacking in performance halls for the Civic. We were listening to the Eagles on the way over here. I saw the Eagles in the Civic in 1970 something, Bearden High School, and it was just like, I mean, it's just not a place you want to go to concerts. And I agree. So we all agree with you. It's a iterative type thing that I think that Stephanie would tell you is you just can't do everything at once. But this is still high on their radar.
But the reworking of the Tennessee Theater is beautiful. Last time I was in there, the time before and after that redone,
and amazing.
It was fantastic.
Come back soon. We're gonna be opening back up. Yes.
So I do just want to say a little bit more about this because Seth, I think you've hit on a really important point in that we're not just a one pony show. Right? We have the ability in this community, and I think we need to embrace this ability to do more than one thing. And so one of the things I've been really impressed with is as we have researched and visited other communities, most of which our size already have a sports stadium. They also are investing in other public venues. So, we see other cities that are, not only do they have their baseball stadium, but they're also building a new soccer stadium, a new basketball venue, a new coliseum. And, I think that we can invest in more than one thing, particularly if we're smart about it. And as you dig into more of the weeds on the financing for the stadium, what you're going to see is that the liability and the obligation to the city and the county leave us plenty of room to be able to invest in other venues. And I mean, I'm a strong believer, and of course, I'm an advocate as part of my job to get this project through the finish line or across home plate, whatever you want to say.
That's the appropriate pun. Yeah, use the second one.
That was good, Stephanie.
But what I would say is that what we found in other cities is that when you invest in really great attractions and venues, then it becomes an incentive. Then it draws the crowds that then we need to have other venues. So we need to continue investing in those kinds of things. So, anyways, I could go on about that, but. Talk about the
I get. And I'm sorry, Stephanie. Let's come back to that. But I would really welcome the opportunity to try to explain the financing because I think the first thing, again, Seth, I hope you don't mind because I was curious what your format was. As I said, so I listened to a couple of your episodes this morning as I was working,
Uh-oh.
And so no, it was great. This is okay? Wonderful.
Right. Hey. The dog snuck in. Are you guys good with dogs?
We got the dog. I love the dog.
He makes random appearances from time to time, and then a kid will come in because he'll freak out because he let the dog out.
I'm seriously jealous that I don't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we allowed to pet the dog?
Yeah, he's fine.
Yeah, okay.
He's just he's a what's the word? He gets excitable. He'll get up in your lap if you don't want to.
Oh
but,
no,
you just push it back.
Our dog died recently, and so
that's
I really
that's
miss.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. So, anyways, let's
you
you
were talking about me. Can you
yes.
continue?
No. So Seth, say Chris wants to finance a school. Chris financed lots of schools, right? So how does Chris finance a school? A public asset, right? He goes and issues bonds to the county of Knox County, right? Mm-hmm. And we build a school. He puts the full faith and credit of the county behind it. In other words, that if he can't pay the debt service on those bonds, he's going to go raise your taxes and my taxes to pay those bonds. He's going to raise your property taxes. He is required by law to do that. And so that's called putting the full faith and credit, the general obligation of the county behind the bonds. That is the lowest cost form of borrowing for the city and the county. So if I'm you, I'm like, well, why aren't you doing that? That's the cheapest way to borrow money for a stadium like this. It's a public asset. Just go out and borrow it. Just issue GO debt, full faith and credit debt. Just go do it. Well, the problem there is a constitutional issue. You cannot lend the city's or the county's taxing power to benefit a private entity. And what does it mean to benefit a private entity? There's a lot of case law and things like that. But the bottom line is we believe, as most experienced lawyers in my area believe, that a really long-term lease or a contract where you allow somebody like the team to basically manage or control the stadium for a long period of time would result in that being unconstitutional. So we could issue geo debt, but then we could only get the team to commit for, say, a 10-year period of time. We don't want that. We don't want to build a stadium. We want them to be there for, a long duration. So, all right, so we say, okay, we can't do traditional bonds. And the reason I mentioned your prior things, because I know it seems like a little bit of smoke and mirrors, but people got to understand is we can't do the simple method if we want to have a long-term lease with the team, so that we know they're going to be in the market, that they don't. We trust Randy Boyd. He loves Knoxville, but the same thing is we want to protect our community by having a long-term arrangement with the Cubs are a very strong franchise and a very great name recognition, and we'd really like to keep them here. So we're going to have a long-term relationship with Randy. So that means we can't use traditional geo debt of the city and the county to finance this. So what's the next alternative? How have other people, and you've heard me talk about all across the state, financed similar facilities? Well, the way you do it is you form a sports authority, which we've done, and they issue the bonds for the stadium. So they first pledge whatever revenues are available to pay the bonds. What's revenue number one? Rent from the team. We hope about $1 million a year minimum, right? So of that $4 million, there's 25% of it right there. Then we have all these sales tax revenues we're talking about from the stadium itself, which we know we get already, plus this district that we're trying to create. We're hoping between the two of them, and there's a big range here, and I readily admit it, and we're hiring consultants to analyze this for us, but we're looking probably somewhere between $1.2 million and, say, $1.8 million of the sales tax revenues from those sources. And so use the low number with me, $1.2 million. That gets us up to about $2.2 million of new revenue sources that we don't have right now to pay this stadium off. So where else are we going to get that $1.8 million? We're still $1.8 million short, right? And so where are we going to get that $1.8 million? Well, Randy's going to build $140 million, he says, of private development around it. The property taxes, if you did them in a form of property taxes off a development that size, roughly $2.3 million, right there. So, but we all know from past experience that redeveloping blighted properties like this is expensive. The brownfield aspects of it, the environmental aspects of it, the demolition is very expensive for him to be doing what he's doing. So we've generally been asked to do TIFs and pilots for a portion of that. I heard Daniel on your podcast talking about 40 and 50-year TIFs and pilots where he's from. We don't do that. I'm looking forward. I'd love to come back on your show with Daniel and talk about TIFs and pilots because it's it's
New Jersey, so who knows what's going on.
Yes, in New Jersey, they just do things the New Jersey way. We do things the right way down here. We analyze the financial statements, and we do them as short as we can. Stephanie recently had a Chris for a 20-year pilot, and by the time she beat up on them, they were down to 6.5 years, and it was good. It was what was needed to get the project done. But no matter what, we expect to split those revenues off those new projects, and it can't be done through property taxes. It would have to be done through what's called tax increment financing or through a pilot. But roughly, it could be easily $1 million, but again, in our little budgeting, we've been using a very conservative number of $600,000. So we're saying, look, worst case scenario, we have a good $2.8 million new revenue streams that we don't have right now to pay that $4 million of debt. So worst case scenario, we have $1.2 million to be split among the city and the county, $600,000 each. Seth, do you know how much $600,000 is in? It's
like $1.25 a resident in the county.
Right.
A year.
Would you pay $1.25 to have an outdoor concert venue?
Well, I mean, because in the traditional version of the loan, that's one of the things we were talking about.
Yes.
I asked one of my regular friends, or one of my co-hosts, I apologize. I was like, would you pay $20 a year for a baseball stadium? He's like, no, I don't really like baseball. I was like, would you pay $20 a year for an outdoor stadium that might get some concerts that you want to go to? It's like, yeah, that'd be worth it to me.
Yeah.
And I think that doing that math makes it. Thinking about it like that way, because there are almost 500,000 of us running around here.
And you know what percentage of
the
debt service?
I guess city folks would have to pay that twice, so they'd have to pay $250 a year.
Yes, but they're closer to the stadium, so
they can walk.
But that's less than
take a bus.
That's less than 1% of either of their debt service. I mean, we're talking. I mean, this is. And I'm so excited that people are interested in the stadium, but compared to a lot of things that are going on in both their budget, this is very, very small.
And to just to piggyback off what he's saying, so the county $600,000 that is left, if we split the 1.2, we're going to pay for that out of hotel tax,
right? Which by law has to go into a touristable item, which this absolutely could fall under that category.
Specifically identify stadiums.
So what do we do? What do we do with all our hotel motel tax anyway?
So
off topic.
40% has to go to the direct promotion of tourism, which we use. Us and the city both use Visit Knoxville for that vehicle. 40% goes to tourism related facilities, either for the retirement of debt or for operations. For us, that is Convention Center. It is East Tennessee History Center, Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, and then 10% goes to the city for tourism-related expenses, and we keep 10% for tourism-related expenses. So it's all related around tourism,
right?
But it's just four different types of buckets.
So where's the city coming up with that $600,000 a year?
Sorry, I was on mute. I mean, I think we're still looking at that, and we've got a couple years before we're going to be seeing any of this hit our budget. So I think things can change in the next couple of years. It's on our radar, but the reality is that it's not. I mean, we're working through our budget right now, and when I look at $600,000, obviously that's meaningful money. But
what's the city's total budget?
Our total budget is Lord, you'd have to ask me that.
I looked it up last night, Stephanie. The total budget was over $435 million. And
I was going to say, it's over $400 million.
Yeah, and net of grants was about $350 million. So you're talking less, I think I calculated it was 0.003% of the city's budget.
Right.
So,
it's itty bitty.
Yes.
Okay. So I guess in thinking about it, trying to figure out what I want to talk about and how I wanted to address this thing. So I guess sell me on the worst case scenario. What is if the worst thing happens? What happens to me as a resident?
Worst thing happens to you, we owe $4 million of debt, and you just said, "Well, Mamantov, you just told me that you were covering at least 2.8." Okay, the team goes bankrupt and disappears. There goes our rent. Worst case scenario. The buildings, I don't even know how we would lose the incremental property tax revenue, because once the buildings are built, you're going to get the taxes unless
the top level of the business goes under and goes bankrupt as well, and then there's
then you still collect the property taxes one day. They're not even subject to bankruptcy, and so someday you will get the taxes. That one is almost bulletproof. Sales tax. We saw what could happen. A pandemic can happen. I mean, the incremental sales tax have been coming off the stadiums around the baseball stadiums across the state for 30 years, and I mean until this past year, everything worked like clockwork. But can I guarantee you we won't have a pandemic again? I mean, none of us can do that. And Seth, I mean, again, I hope you'll have us back when we have better information for you. We're hiring a consultant to look at the numbers. He may call BS on me and say, you were way off in your numbers, and I'll be the first to come and say, Seth, I got it wrong, buddy. Here's the real numbers based on what we're getting. I mean, I think we're close, because my numbers are from experience. They're somewhat based on the team's numbers, but are about 70% of what the team is estimating. The team is much more optimistic. We're trying to be conservative with the public, and so, but we'll have a much better idea. You asked sort of when a definitive deal would come. I mean, one key to that is us really nailing down what we expect these numbers to be, and we've got an RFP on the streets right now to try to hire a consultant to help us do the best estimations of these numbers we can.
How much is it? How much does the consultant get paid?
We don't know. That's what we're RFP. We want to get the best deal we can.
I mean, I'll do it for about like $40,000. I'll spend a couple months working on it.
I think you'll be competitive if you want to do that.
I doubt I'll have quality results for you, but I'll try.
Yes. Now 50% of the criteria are experience. So I don't know if you think so.
Yeah, I because that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at this the sales tax revenue portion of it, and it's like thinking 1.2 mil or so to 1.8, and it's like try to do the math backwards, and so that's going to be $10-12 million in sales annually from those locations to generate that total sales tax revenue, give or take. I mean, the math's not perfect on that, but ballparking.
So if Randy really builds 100,000 square feet, Seth, I mean, $200 a square foot to $300 a square foot, depending on its restaurant use, which I think is a very reasonable number per square foot. And so you can multiply that and then multiply it on the sales tax and just sort of get a, that kind of estimate on the thing, so on that portion.
Okay, so semi off topic, I guess this is part of it too. So if you're a landlord and you are renting a property, is that sales taxable, or is it just the?
No, it's just
it would
the
just
actual
be the
sales,
tenant doing whatever the tenant is
doing. Yes.
Okay.
Lease revenues are not taxable in Tennessee.
All right, interesting side note. All right, that's something to think about. Okay, so again, worst case scenario.
Don't encourage it, please. I think so.
I'm good at getting off topic, I promise.
Yeah, they don't care.
The worst case scenario is the team goes bankrupt or something like that. We're still going to make sales tax revenue because those facilities are going to be doing something, whether the baseball team's there or not.
Right.
I mean, it's really just if you want to look at it as an expansion of the old city, and the activities that go on in the old city now go under the bridge instead of stopping at the bridge.
Right.
And
like that, yeah.
I'm not trying to sell this for you. I'm
I'm
just telling you what I hear.
Stephanie, get that down. We're going under the bridge from the old city. So yeah.
We'll bring out. I'll reach out to my friends at the Chili Peppers and see if I can get you copyright usage for that. I'm making stuff up. I don't know that at all. And so then, okay. All right. I'm trying to think of how to do the math and talk about it, but I'm not very good at that. So really, it's the reasonable rent that'll be the biggest hurt on a full failure from the baseball side.
Probably, but I would also, let's say they go bankrupt, Seth, and they disappear. What are we going to do? We're going to rock out every night. I mean, it's not like it's not a valuable venue. We just lost a baseball team. I mean, we'll probably have a direct relationship with the professional soccer team. I mean, it's just going to be reprogramming. Will we get $1 million of rent from that? No, but there's no way we're not going to get $500,000 or some number. It's not like that will disappear either. It just may not be the steady stream. But, I don't know if you heard Randy at one of the meetings. Somebody basically said, "Are you going to hold this team?" He said, "I'm holding this team till I die. This is my, my Lamar Hunt episode or something." It was pretty funny. But, I think the risk of Randy not paying his rent is, as long as Randy Boyd is... and the dude is like running 20 miles a day still. So I think he's going to be around for a while. So.
Fair enough. All right. So I did have a couple questions that were submitted to me from some listeners. The first one being, how many public forums open to the entire community will be held about the stadium? And he's specifically asking when they're going to be in person. I understand that's kind of that's not necessarily in the available to do currently given the situation. But is there an intent to put out a schedule for meetings coming up and when and where?
They can speak to that.
Yeah. So great question, Seth. So right now we're in the process of scheduling a live stream public forum, and really until this, I think you described this so well at the beginning of the podcast, which is we're trying to get some things checked off to even know whether we can move forward with the project. we need to get this legislation piece understood, and then once that happens and we have a better idea about the feasibility study, then we can start setting up a schedule for public meetings. What we don't want to do is schedule a whole bunch of public meetings and then find out that we can't get the preliminary checklist knocked off, and so public meetings, I will be announcing something tomorrow for a live stream event, and then the longer schedule will come out after we know more about the legislation.
And Stevie, you think that live stream event probably 2-3 weeks off? That'd be the
it'll be in the next couple of weeks. We're working with everybody's schedules, both mayors and the three of us right now, to get that set in the next.
Right, and I can speak to the fact that it's hard to get you guys three sat down together in the same place at the same time as well. All right, so then the last question I have, at least from the audience, is as essentially as the landlord in this conversation, will we have access to? Because I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but this is more directly answering this person's question, is will we as the governing bodies have access to the books on the tenant, essentially?
That's a good question. We haven't, I was going to use the word broach, but it sounds so legalistic. But, typically, the tenants, their books are typically private. Certainly the Sports Authority books will be a public record. People have access to, the payment of the rent, how the sales tax revenues are being collected, how the debt service is being paid. One thing we've got to understand, Seth, whether is market. My understanding from what from prior experiences that Major League Baseball, is pretty protective about their proprietary model and stuff like that. So they generally will give you some information, but they won't, they're not going to, take the shorts down and let you, really, study them as what some people would like to do.
Okay, I mean that answers those questions. I don't like I said. It's just it's seeking information and trying to maybe put it in more normal people terms.
Yeah.
Because I get caught up a lot of times. Like you've used the term a number of times. Service the debt. Again, it's like that's not how I talk about my mortgage. It's a mortgage, and so and I get it. It's a little bit different than a normal mortgage, and that's why we have a different term for it. But for the lay people out there, it's a weird term, and so trying to understand how some of that breaks down. I think it's helpful for people getting a better and clearer understanding of what's actually happening. And then the only other one really at play right now, I guess, that has any pushback is going to be the community involvement and whether how the neighborhoods are talking about it. And I had a Dr. Lundy on this morning, and we talked about it a little bit, and she'd mentioned that she'd gone here and there and she's talked to different people about it, and it's, she's got certain groups that are like, hurry up, why aren't you done yet? And then other groups that are, you please do not. And so I don't know how that factors in. I guess I don't know if that's a question or not, but how do we factor that kind of portion into this conversation on how the community is reacting to, especially the very local portion of the community, as far as the direct impact of having that as a neighbor?
No matter if Stephanie takes that one, she's probably the most attuned to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be really important that we listen. And so again, not only are we scheduling the live stream that will be community-wide, and that was the question that was asked earlier, but we've also started scheduling meetings and have already started meeting with some more local, very immediate vicinity community organizations like the Old City Merchants Association. We had a meeting with African-American pastors who serve the East Knoxville community. I'm actually corresponding. I'm double dutying. Sorry, Seth, but I'm corresponding with the East Knoxville Business and Professional Association. There are 3 East Knoxville neighborhoods that we've reached out to. We're going to be reaching out to neighborhood organizations in other parts of the community as well. I think those community-wide forums are really valuable, but I also think it's important to meet with groups that have very specific interests and that have immediate adjacency to the project, so that we can hear what their concerns are, whether they support the project or don't support the project. We want to hear that, but B, what I've been asking people, even if you don't support it, if it were to move forward, what would be important to you to make something like this a value added in your life? So, it's good. You get good feedback when you ask that question as well.
All right, so that's all I've got. I'm sure I'll think of something in about 30 minutes. That's how I always do stuff. I end an interview, and I'm like, man, I should have asked him that question. But so the last one is just for you, Marcus. How do I go about hiring you to help me get these two to start my project?
What's your project?
I don't know. I got to make it up. But we don't need the project. We just need the legwork. That's how.
Well, my friend Stephanie, if it's in the city, you would start with her. If you, her Office of Economic Development considers all requests for incentives, whether they be a pilot, a TIF, or lots of other things that they can help with. So as soon as you're ready with maybe that's how
you
got to have a project to start. So,
how can one of my ingenious listeners who has a project they're trying to get off the ground get started? I should have asked it less selfishly. I apologize.
And I'm sorry, you don't know. I hate when I use those words because you asked the question. It's really important. I mean, the city certainly has its focus. I mean, I'm obviously very passionate about downtown redevelopment, and I certainly, I wish that the free market could have gotten it done without some of the incentives we had to offer, but I feel like some of the incentives we had to offer had started downtown. And downtown, again, I'm biased, but to me it's a very pleasant, nice place to be now. But there certainly are other areas. I mean, Stephanie is very active in the areas. We're going up Broadway and Old North Central, so your listeners have buildings there they want to renovate and things like that. That's an area, the Magnolia Corridor area. Those are our focus of areas that, because of the historic nature of the buildings, because of the need to meet codes in some of these renovations is quite expensive. Is that certainly if they they have a project, Stephanie's got me helping her with a couple of projects right now that we're really excited about. Some of them are pretty small, but they're going to make a huge difference in improving, the immediate area around and solving some of the blight. But it's hard for a city. You were joking about your own podcast. It's hard for this. The city is. It's hard for them to add a helping hand for a single, a small business in the tech side where it doesn't have much of a physical asset presence. It's much more for us to help with things from facade grants to things like that, and it's true from the counties right now. Chris and I are right now going through the AJ building redevelopment. We're really like to see it get back on the tax rolls. It's going to take time and effort. The building has been so compartmentalized over the years that it's going to be a very expensive project, but it's such a beautiful building. I was listening to you talk about the city county building, and I was getting a big smile. I don't know if I have several friends that agree with you that Chris, he wants the city county building. We're going to convert it to a private. Your office is a condo.
No. It's we're going full casino. We got We got to get the state involved and get some legalities changed and stuff like that. There's my project.
There's your project. If you can get Knoxville to have a casino, the city county building, I think is.
Right, so we'll get a Sands Knoxville or something like that.
That'd be awesome.
That's my goal.
I think I'm going to try to assign that to somebody else.
Yes, I think so.
I just think it's. I actually think the city county building it's a cool looking building. It's just, no offense, guys, but the boring stuff goes on there. It should be a fun place, not a.
You're calling us boring now?
Hey,
really?
fun.
I mean, well, to be fair, like I pay fees. I go do. The non-fun stuff. A court a few times here and there. It's been a while, but I've had to do a few court hearings in my day, and then it's part of life, I guess. But I don't know. I to be fair, I do have a good time when I go down there more recently, because it tends to be more stuff like this than it was.
You don't want to blow it up. I have friends who think it's so ugly. They just want to blow it up and start over again because it's such a nice piece of property.
I mean, either one works. It's just we could move the city county into the TVA towers where the schools are and stuff like that, and then we could just put something fun down there. Anyway,
all right. Will you have us back when we have better, more definitive plan to talk?
I'll have you back every third Sunday if that's what you guys want to do. I'm here to understand and try to share. I'm here to learn and share the process of learning, because I think that's a lot of people miss out on.
One thing, Seth, before we go, and I know that Stephanie shares this sentiment, we're very fortunate to have Mark on our team. He's the best in the state, and we're lucky to have him. He's worked on deals from Titan Stadium to Bridgestone Arena to the AAA Stadium in Memphis. And he's on our side, and that's a benefit to us. And as a taxpayer, you should be thankful for that.
That's embarrassing, but he likes it because I went to Beard in high school. And
right.
So I think so.
I mean, well, we're not going to make age jokes at this point.
Yeah.
Anything else you guys want out? Is there any specifics that you want me to put in the show notes, or you want to share? Just if anybody wants more information, a place that you guys know of other than this that they can go look at.
I hope we'll get you the information about the live stream since we have it, right, Seth?
Yeah, I'll put that on.
Yeah, absolutely. And Seth, I won't speak for these other guys, but I'm sure they would share this. I would love to come back because I think we're still, even though we've been talking about this stadium for a while in our community, we still are somewhat early in the process. And there are lots of other things we could talk about. The history of baseball in East Knoxville, I think, is really key and important, and that we're looking to ensure that when it comes back to Knoxville, it's going back to its historic home, or at least in the near vicinity of its historic home.
Well, let's be honest. You just want to come hang out with the dog. It's not about wanting to share any information.
Well, listen, I am. You might notice on my Zoom that I've got dogs in the background. I am somewhat of a dog lover, so I feel very upset that I'm not there.
Depending on
his name?
His name is Rowdy, and depending on the day of the week, I might let you take him home with you, because he has lived up to his name. That's for sure.
That's awesome. So there's a lot more to talk about. I could go on, but I do think it wouldn't be. This has been very pleasant, and appreciate your interest in the topic and covering it in a fair way. I think skepticism is really important at this stage. So I'm glad you're bringing that to this process, and our job is to help overcome some of that skepticism and create a really good deal for the community and for our taxpayers.
Right, and like I said, I think it's a matter of understanding it, and I think there's enough people out there that aren't taking the effort or energy into understanding it, because there are parts that are more complicated than others, but just a good, simple, basic understanding, and then we can have a conversation about it instead of just talking in abstracts and what I did or what this other town did or something like that, because this is going to be different once we get the specifics.
Yep.
Excuse me. All right, that's it. I'm getting you out of my house. I don't know what's going on. My throat's this is my third today, and so at the end of these, my throat gets a little crazy. Multi-use stadium conversation, everybody. Stephanie Welch. Oh, excuse me again. Chris Caldwell and Mark Mamantov, the Beard and Bulldog himself, all came over and helped me out and helped me explain and talk about things. And like I said, this isn't over. This is just the beginning. We're early in the conversation. And I agree with you guys out there that it does seem like it's moving kind of fast, and maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But for now, remember, it's some of the things that you see happening currently are checklists to get to the conversation, not checklists to get to the end. And I think that's something that we need to be conscious of when we hear about what's going on at the state level as far as this project goes, and some other things like that. And so we're Almost Agreement at gmail.com, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Our website is live, almostagreement.com, and that's it. I'm taking a break. I'm going to take the rest of the day off and maybe tomorrow. So everybody have a good afternoon. I appreciate everybody for listening.